This is the applied skills video for Module 2, which will be focusing on the skill of identifying the specific circumstances of a case study. This applied skill will also be used directly in your Module 2 discussion board post for this week. So reiterated for Module 1, our discussions use a case study approach, which utilizes complex real-world situations to examine professional practice issues in depth and in detail as they develop over a period of time. So in regards to the applied skills for Module 2 and demonstrating them, the Module 2 discussion will continue this sequence by introducing the second of the 4 case study characteristics. So case study number 1 characteristic was the general principle or issues of the case study. And this week we're going to build on that, introducing case study characteristic number 2, which are the situations or specific circumstances of a case. Similar to issues in Module 1, situation is sort of the common name we may use to refer to this second type of characteristic. But for purposes of our discussion, we'll be increasingly referring to examples of this characteristic as the specific circumstances of the case. So these are concrete particulars of the specific situation that always accompany an applied concept and that frequently clarify, create shade, or modify our understanding of that general principle within the context of that particular situation. So an example of this from outside of the profession that should be easy for all of us to understand would be something like this. The general principle or issue that killing is wrong, right? We all more or less agree with that concept. However, this generally agreed upon principle can be modified or shade can be created around it if we were to introduce a specific circumstance to the situation, like the idea of in cases of self-defense or within the context of serving in the armed services through an act of war. So while these specific circumstances are still widely accepted contexts, they may modify an even more widely accepted general principle, like the idea that killing is wrong. So similar to Module 1, there are many of these to choose from within each of the situation or case studies, but you'll need to name and define them for yourself as part of demonstrating this applied skill. So it's up to you to interpret these specific circumstances from the case studies that you'll be reading this week. Module 2 also initiates the use of actual professional practice case studies. As previously mentioned, these case studies, as with real life scenarios, can become increasingly complex. So a good case study will often have both theoretical and applied aspects to it. And those aspects can shed light on each other. So they're frequently in apparent conflict with each other and require that you fill in the reasoning gaps about how the situation should be evaluated and what action should be taken. Again, there's not only one right answer in cases like this, but you'll need to interpret for yourself based on the situation. So with this week's case studies, we'll be continuing our approach from Module 1. You'll be identifying a primary issue or general principle and identifying 2 perspectives or sides that could be taken on it, and then discussing the pros and cons of those sides that could be argued. However, with Module 2, we'll now be adding in the use of situations or specific circumstances. So while Module 1 used issues which are wider in nature and more amenable to reasoning in terms of general principles, Module 2 will now focus additionally on mitigating situations, which require reasoning also in terms of these specific circumstances. So further, as we continue to utilize the specific circumstances as they're relevant to others, we'll also begin to consciously broaden the nature and the tone of our responses to speak in a more of a public voice. So as professionals, we must constantly be speaking and acting beyond our own personal opinions and instead phrase our analysis of issues and situations in terms of what the impacts are on and for other people, the more public voice of professional practice in a larger society. This also helps as we relate the challenges of our project to the specific stakeholders we're working with and in trying to convince them of our approach. For instance, when a client is made up of a board of individuals instead of just 1 or 2 individuals, one of those board members we're dealing with may be responsible for the financial aspects of the project, while another one might be concerned about building maintenance and facilities management issues, while a third might be driven by the overall aspects and the design quality of the experience and of the project. So having the ability to speak to and from all of these perspectives and all these different constituents is part of what makes an architect effective in moving forward with and generating client buy-in on our design concepts. So that's what you'll be looking at in the case studies for the module this week. You'll be looking at those general principles and issues that are present in these case studies and these specific circumstances that then go on to modify how we're thinking about them. And you'll have to interpret those for yourselves and talk about the perspectives of how we could react to those in different situations.